Morning to everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. This is the Commonwealth Capital for Communities Fund How to Apply webinar. Hello, everyone. If it's possible, please mute yourself so that there's no background sound. In order to make this go smoothly, we're going to have everyone stay muted for the duration of the How to Apply presentation. If you have a question that comes up or you think of during the presentation, please drop it in the chat that you can find the little bubble for in Teams up in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. And we will get to those once we finish the presentation. So the Commonwealth's Capital for Community Funds is a program that is housed within the Department of Housing and Community Development. It's a state agency committed to creating safe, affordable, and prosperous communities to live, work, and do business in Virginia. Within the Department of Housing and Community Development, there is the Economic Development and Community Vitality Office, which houses the Commonwealth's Capital for Communities Fund, as well as a variety of other programs that you are likely familiar with, including Community Business Launch, Enterprise Zone, Go Virginia, Industrial Revitalization Fund, Port Host Communities, which is also industrial revitalization specifically for communities that have ports, and the Virginia Main Street Program. If you are interested in learning more about any of those programs, please feel free to reach out and contact us. We have a division email address, which is cro@dhcd.virginia.gov. So as many of you know, the Virginia Small Business Resiliency Fund was created in 2022 with some additional funding from the General Assembly to help small businesses throughout the Commonwealth that were impacted by COVID-19. And in September of 2023, the General Assembly codified that program as an annual non-reverting fund in the amount of $1.35 million to continue the work of the Resiliency Fund in building capacity in eligible CDFI institutions, supporting the creation and expansion of their programs and services, and increasing access to capital to and underserved small businesses throughout the Commonwealth. This funding was intended to provide financing and support of small businesses, housing development and rehabilitation projects, and community revitalization real estate projects in the Commonwealth. As part of that codified legislation, they gave our agency, the Department of Housing and Community Development, the authority to build out the program design, as well as naming the program and creating kind of the structure of that. So with that, we created the Commonwealth's Capital for Communities Fund. This was created to provide grants to community development financial institutions and other similar entities for the purpose of providing financing to small businesses, housing development and rehabilitation projects, and community revitalization real estate projects in the Commonwealth. Because of the amount of funding that we received this year, that $1.35 million, and in order to make as large of an impact as possible, we have decided this year to focus the Commonwealth's Capital for Communities Fund specifically on small business programming. So although there is in the legislative language, the ability for this program to assist housing development and commercial or community development real estate, for the purposes of this year, we would like to focus and have applicants focus their programs on small business and entrepreneurship funding and financing. We outlined some specific goals for the program. The first of which is hoping to receive applications where the program would expand the CDFI ecosystem in Virginia by supporting institutions in achieving that CDFI certification status through the U.S. Department of Treasury. Increasing surface area coverage to or underserved communities, and by building organizational capacity within the CDFIs through outreach, research and development, support staffing, and administrative expenses. We want to see an expansion or creation of new financial products and services that meet identified market needs, specifically those that support capital access, small businesses for this year specifically, and then creating or implementing technical assistance to those borrowers that are served. In terms of funding priorities, we are looking specifically for the creation or expansion of products or services in underserved geographies, demographics, and business sectors with a focus on historically underbanked populations. Additionally, we would like applications that can demonstrate the timely deployment of dollars or resources. So meaning that the work plan is achievable, ambitious but achievable within the time frame that is given for the different levels of award funding. We want to see an expansion of technical assistance or services to the borrowers that are being served, as well as, again, that capacity building within the Virginia CDFI ecosystem. To be eligible, you either have to be an entity or organization seeking CDFI certification status through the U.S. Department of Treasury, or an already certified CDFI defined by the U.S. Department of Treasury. For those entities or organizations that are currently seeking CDFI certification status, we want to know what you've done to this date to work towards that certification status. And can demonstrate the steps that have been taken towards the certification. And for certified CDFIs, you will need to be able to demonstrate that you are certified through the U.S. Department of Treasury, that you have an established history of commercial lending and a history of lending in Virginia. So for available funding and match, we have two pots of funding, one for entities seeking CDFI certification and one for certified CDFIs. So for entities or organizations that are seeking CDFI certification status, they can apply for up to $150,000 with a match requirement of 25%. Now, of that 25% match, 10% of that needs to be cash, and the other 15% can be in kind. Think of in kind as staff hours towards that specific program that you would be applying for. So program specific staffing. For certified CDFIs, they can apply for up to $300,000. And the match requirement for these CDFIs is actually going to be based on their asset size. So for CDFIs with assets of $50,000 to $5 million, there is a 25% match requirement, so $75,000 with a 10% cash breakdown and 50% in kind. For those with an asset size of $5 million to $15 million, there's a 50% match requirement, which you see the breakdown of cash and in kind there in the chart. And then for those with an asset size of over 15 million, you would be looking at a 1-to-1 match requirement. So you're asking for 300,000 and you're matching with 300,000. Eligible activities for both entities seeking CDFI certification and certified CDFIs are the same, but the activities under which, or the activities that would result from those categories would be slightly different, and we'll go through those now. So eligible activities for entities seeking CDFI certification. One would be certification technical assistance and planning, which would mean the organizations that are pursuing that status can apply for funding to defray expenses associated with the certification process, including hiring a consultant to navigate the process, writing the application, and an anticipated grant outcome or something that we would expect from that sort of application would be either a documented plan of how to apply for that certification or demonstrated steps towards completing the certification. Entities seeking CDFI certification can also apply for funding for capacity building. That would mean funding to support outreach, research, development necessary to determine their appropriate target markets, target populations, or certain financial products and services that would meet the program's priorities. You can use capacity building grant funding to support staffing in addition to administrative and operational expenses. However, funding in the capacity building category should be program related. Only 10% of the total fund request can be used for non-program or indirect program expenses. So we're looking to have most of the capacity building request dollars going towards activities that directly support whatever program you are applying for. And some anticipated grant outcomes under this category might be a well-researched or effective planning document that fully describes the local or regional business development strategy to increase small business capital access in a distressed community or population. The next two categories of eligible activities for entities seeking CDFI certification are financial products. Again, products that support small businesses, including but not limited to microfinancing, small business loans or grant programs. Loan loss reserves would fall under this category, credit enhancement, interest rate buydowns, etc. And an anticipated grant outcome for a financial product would really be the outcomes that we would want to see from a financial product, such as the amount of dollars deployed, the amount of borrowers that are receiving funding, how many business startups or expansions were resulted out of the program, et cetera. And then support activities. So this would be technical assistance to small businesses or entrepreneur borrowers, such as financial literacy classes or that sort of technical assistance to them before they ended up becoming a borrower. So eligible activities for CDFIs, like I said, the categories are the same as entities seeking certification, but the activities within them, those categories might vary slightly. So you can apply for funding for planning, meaning that organizations can use funding to complete market studies that are going to assist in expanding their current or accessing new target markets. Or they could use the fund to support outreach to their markets that have already been identified or those identified in a completed market study. An anticipated outcome might be a completed market study with assessment by an outside consultant. Again, CDFIs can use CCCF funding for capacity building, meaning that they can use the funding to support staffing, administrative, and operational expenses, but it can be no more than 50% of the total request. So no more than $50,000, excuse me, could be requested as specifically capacity building. Funding in this program category should be program related, and a maximum of 10% of capacity building funds can go to non-program or indirect program expenses. And just to note, non-program or indirect program expenses has been defined in the program design of the program. We can talk a little bit about that at the end if you have questions, but it has been defined there. And some anticipated outcomes for a capacity building project within this would be the ability to demonstrate that the increase in lending, technical assistance, job creation, et cetera, was a result specifically of grant funding going towards staffing, administrative, and operational expenses. Financial products are also eligible activities to apply for. So again, products that support small businesses and entrepreneurs. And we would be looking at those anticipated outcomes again, dollars deployed to the community, how many borrowers, if jobs are being created or expanded, if businesses are being created or expanded, et cetera. And then again, support activities. So technical assistance to those borrowers. You're applying to create some sort of programming that would assist the borrowers. Outcomes. So I mentioned outcomes earlier. Outcomes is actually one of the attachments that you would provide in the application that we have a template for. But when we talk about outcomes, we want to know with the program that you have outlined and that you'd be applying for funding for, what would be the impact? So how many loans or dollars would be deployed, businesses created, expanded, and retained, jobs created and retained, specific programs developed or implemented, the number of communities that are served or their service is being improved, organizations served and improved, participants as well, technical assistance that's been provided, any plans that are developed and implemented, in addition to leveraged private investment. And then, of course, there could be outcomes not listed here that would be project specific. Scoring criteria. So as we review the applications that are received for this program, we would be looking at the scoring breakdown for these 4 categories. The program design is basically the who, what, when, where, why, how of your project. So what are you proposing? Who is it going to help? What are you intending to do with the funding, etc. Efficient use of resources. That would mean that the funding that is applied for is being used effectively, and it can also be deployed in the time frame that you would receive based on the level of funding that you would apply for. Capacity refers to the ability of the organization that is applying to be able to complete the project, and making sure that they have the resources as well as the staffing to complete the project. And then, of course, we want to see an alignment of the program with our funding priorities and the funding goals overall. In order to be eligible for funding in general, an application must score above a 70. So here's the timeline. If you're an organization that has not already received a grant from DHCD in the past, I would encourage you to register within the Central Application Management System. CAMS is what we call it, which is used to administer and manage grants at our agency. And I'll go a little bit over how to do that, but it can take a couple of weeks from the time that you register to be approved. So you'll want to do that as soon as you can. Applications are now open. They opened last Wednesday on November 8th, and they will remain open until January 30th. Ideally, our agency will score those applications that are received in February of 2024, with an announcement hopefully happening in late spring, early summer of 2024, and having those projects under contract by summer of next year. So I mentioned briefly about timely deployment of dollars. So for emerging CDFIs that are doing planning and capacity building, they will have 24 months from the time contract is signed to complete the activities that they've applied for. And existing CDFIs, their financial product and service grants would have 36 months from the date of the contract to complete activities applied for and awarded. So accessing CAMS, which are the grant management system at DHCD, you would go to our website, dhcd.virginia.gov, and in the upper right-hand corner, you will see Access CAMS. By clicking that, it will take you to our application management system where you will have the opportunity to log in. As you can see in the navigation bar at the top, there is the registration button where you would go to register. I also like to highlight the user guide. So for those who are not familiar, the CAMS system looks a little bit different to those of us in DHCD who are managing grants than it does to those that are participants or receiving grants from our agency. It can be a little finicky at times, but there is a complete user guide that is really helpful that you can download and read if you have any issues. Of course, our program staff is happy to help answer any question that you might have about the CAMS system. But from this page, you would put in your email address and password if you are already registered as an organization in our system. And from there, it will take you to a program page where you'll have a drop-down menu of programs that are currently open for application. From the drop-down menu, you should be able to see the Commonwealth's Capital for Communities Fund. And from that selection, it would take you directly to the application itself. So there are 4 different elements of the application in CAMS that we'll go over a little bit today. One of that is program information, such as your contact information, who's going to be main point of contact, and the areas in which your CDFI or entity seeking certification status covers. A budget tab where you would fill in both what you were requesting as well as your match and where the match sources are coming from. You'll give us a project description or narrative of what you are proposing, and then a variety of attachments. For the application information, again, we're looking for that primary point of contact in your team. We're looking for a summary of the business or strategic plan, and including your CDFI or organization's mission, the markets you typically serve, any competition in the targeted regions and your clients, your organization's infrastructure and resources that support your ongoing activities. There's also an opportunity to attach your business or strategic plan for your organization. This is also where you would include existing CDFIs would include the proof of their current federal CDFI certification or recertification status. The next section would be your project information. So this is where you will give us kind of the when, where, how, what, when of your project. So identifying the proposed new target markets or target populations that are going to be served by the funds you are applying for, identifying any new products or services that you're applying for, and then also describing the level of distress of the community or new market that would be served. So if you're wondering how to quantify that level of distress of the underserved entrepreneurs, we're looking at the geography, the unemployment rate of the area, the poverty rate, specific industries impacted, a fiscal stress score. Any of those can be pulled together to give you a general idea of the level of distress. And then the project information will basically include all of these questions. So how does the proposed target market or population differ from what what does the project's product or service, how does it differ from your current? And does this represent an expansion for your organization, or is this something entirely new? How will this project or program support the organization's bottom line? Or how will these funds be recycled if for continued use? So if you are proposing a loan fund where the funds that are repaid go back into the same program, how would you utilize those funds in the future? How are the funds being leveraged with existing federal and local government resources or private sector financial services? Describing how you plan to reach the target market or population through marketing and outreach, and then again, a timeline for that implementation. Again, you'll provide a detailed budget on what you're asking for, as well as the match that you would be including. There is a narrative on that budget that you can include where we would like you to describe the activities, lending, or technical assistance that will be funded with the requested dollars. And then any detail on existing funds, products, or services that are going to be leveraged or securitized as part of the proposal. We want to know how project income from that loans will be used, and if applicable, a plan to keep funding for continuous implementation once those funds are exhausted. Additional information that we ask for, we want to know if your project is going to be committed to or working with SWAM certified contractors or subcontractors, how your organization is going to diversify its funding streams to enable these programs to continue past the grant cycle, so past the funding, and describe how you are leveraging other sources of funding or revenue. So does this proposal include one or more communities that have special districts? And that's kind of looking at us, or for us, looking at districts that overlap, such as Main Street communities, local, state, or federal historic districts, redevelopment zones, technology zones, etc. In terms of required attachments, we have 4 that must be submitted with the application. All of these have templates that are a part of the program design or that I can provide to you. So if you are looking for specific help on the attachments, feel free to reach out. The project summary sheet, an outcomes template, so telling us what you will achieve with the funding that you receive, your business or strategic plan, a sample budget, the proof of your CDFI status or recertification status, and any other supporting documentation that you believe is relevant. An example of this could be letters from supporting organizations if you are in some way partnering with another organization to complete this project. So some tips for CAMS for those who may not have worked with it in the past. It is beneficial to get all of your materials and attachments prepared before you begin the application in CAMS. The system does time out, and you will need to save your work after every tab in order for it to save everything that you've been working on. Google Chrome is the best browser to use for CAMS. Again, make sure you're saving as you go. And we communicate primarily via email, especially prior to awards being made. So make sure that the email address in CAMS is active and regularly monitored. If you've had a change in staff, be sure to update that within the CAMS profile so that once emails are sent out about receiving your application as well as scoring your application, that you will receive those updates from CAMS. Questions. I am going to stop sharing my screen now, and so I can see the chat box, so give me one moment.
Jessica, I can go ahead and read those questions to you if you'd like.
Yes, please.
The first question is from Elizabeth Day. Must you demonstrate a certain amount of lending in Virginia in your track record?
For a certified CDFI, yes. We realize that entities and organizations that are currently seeking certification status, that one of those steps is creating financing and some proof that you've done financing in the past. So for entities seeking certification status, we're not as worried about that.
So Elizabeth, if you're looking for, are we looking for a specific dollar amount or a specific number of loans in order to consider that the demonstration of lending? There's not a specific quantifiable number that we're looking for, just showing that history of lending. The next question, will we receive a copy of the slides? Yes, not only will you receive the slides, but we are recording this session and the recording will also be posted. And the next question, Jessica, can you clarify whether small businesses / entrepreneurs are the focus or exclusive use?
So by the language of the legislation, small businesses is not the exclusive use, but for this year and our purposes, you would be better off focusing your application on small business because it would score higher, because that is our focus for this year, if that makes sense. So what we hope in the future, if we are able to prove the impact and outcomes of this program, that we will see a higher amount of funding and then would be able to open up project applications for that housing and rehabilitation, community real estate development, etc., if that makes sense.
Karen, let us know in the chat box if that answered your question. The next question, any requirements on match source other than in-kind versus cash? Is it okay to use federal CDFI awards as match?
Yes, that is fine. I don't think we put any in the program design, but I would say generally federal match is fine, as well as state match from a different source.
Yeah, we're looking to be as flexible as possible in our determination of match. But if you have any questions on specific items, just send Jessica an email as you're getting ready to submit your application. All right, the next question, can you also clarify the 50% for capacity building? Can we only use that amount of our award for capacity building, but can use the remainder for lending and or technical assistance?
Yes, so for the capacity building, specifically, I think this is referring to certified CDFIs. So for certified CDFIs, you may use up to 50% of your request, so $150,000 towards capacity building. We want to see that you are using that capacity building money for program-related expenses. So if you are hiring someone, you are hiring them to work on whatever program you applied for funding for. So that would mean the rest of the 50% could be used for a product or service. Hopefully that was clear. Let us know if that didn't explain it as well. And then that 10% is, if the 10% maximum is 10% of the 50% can be used for indirect non-program related expenses. So think of that as like overhead, but it's been defined more thoroughly in the program design.
Yeah, so think of the capacity building as that's the internal piece of your grant, what you are going to need to do to deploy those funds, whereas the technical assistance and lending is the external piece. The capacity builder, let's say that you're hiring, will be deploying those funds. And then did Jessica's comment on the 10% answer your question on the indirect costs?
They might not be, I was gonna say, I might have everyone muted, so please let us know in the chat.
So in terms of those indirect costs, yeah, as Jessica said, that's really, we define those in the program guidelines. And if you have specific questions on a specific line item, you can shoot Jessica an email or have a call with her and take a deeper dive into those details. But knowing that you may have an accountant on staff or HR or things like that, that's what we're looking at the 10% with. So I'm not sure who you've negotiated a rate higher than 10% with, but it's not us. And so you can certainly pay more than 10%, but our grant award will only cover that 10% of those indirect costs. And I don't see any new questions coming in. Oh, yes, I do. Hold on. Nope, we answered that question. We're good. Okay. Any other
Well,
questions for Jessica?
I realized that I jumped into the presentation without introducing myself and Rebecca, so apologies, but my name is Jessica Hartness. I am the program administrator for the Commonwealth's Capital for Communities Fund, as well as Community Business Launch. And of course, this is Rebecca Rowe, our associate director. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us at either our email or personal phone numbers. And again, we will be recording, or we have recorded this. So once it has finished recording, we will upload that and provide it to those that were here today. We look forward to receiving applications from everyone, and please reach out at any time to discuss an application or ask any questions.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.